So, the big question in Washington right now is this. Are we about to put American boots on the ground in Iran? Why is it that when politicians say boots on the ground, they always say it like it's a minor fashion choice? Oh, these boots? Just something we threw together for a quick, decade-long regional conflict. Because historically, when America sends troops into the Middle East, it's like opening a bag of chips. You tell yourself just one small operation. And then, before you know it, it's 20 years later and you're sitting in Afghanistan covered in crumbs, wondering where the hell your life went. One of the biggest political promises of the last decade, especially from Donald Trump, was this: no more endless wars. Trump didn't run as a neoconservative. He ran as the guy who looked at the Iraq War and said, why are we spending trillions of dollars turning deserts into slightly different deserts? That was the America First pitch. Not America First, but also Iran Occupation Project 2026. That's a slightly different bumper sticker. Let's do a quick refresher. America invaded Iraq in 2003, and we were expecting a quick victory, grateful locals, and democracy blooming like a freedom garden. Instead, what we got was insurgency, sectarian chaos, $2 trillion in costs, and a generation of veterans carrying the burden. Now, imagine doing that again, but this time with a country that is 3 times larger, 4 times the population, mountainous, militarized, and prepared for asymmetric warfare. Because Iran is not Iraq. Invading Iran would be like trying to occupy a hornet's nest with flip-flops. Deploying American ground troops in Iran would almost certainly trigger a prolonged conflict with devastating humanitarian consequences. Iran is not Iraq in 2003. Iran is a nation of roughly 90 million people with a large military, asymmetric warfare capabilities, and deep regional alliances. Military experts are warning us that seizing or holding territory in Iran would provoke heavy resistance and likely escalate the conflict across the Middle East. Civilian casualties could rise dramatically as urban conflict expands. Iran has already reported hundreds of civilian deaths from the conflict, illustrating how quickly the war can escalate beyond military targets. And here's the moral problem. Urban warfare in a country of 90 million people? That doesn't stay surgical no matter how hard you try. Because the moral danger is actually twofold. American lives would be put at risk in a war without clear objectives, and civilian casualties could create long-term resentment toward the United States. History has shown us over and over again that occupation wars often produce radicalization rather than stability. Afghanistan and Iraq demonstrated that removing infrastructure or regimes doesn't automatically produce democratic outcomes. It can generate insurgency. Surprise, surprise. So, from a moral standpoint, the United States risks repeating the cycle of intervention, occupation, insurgency, and withdrawal. And that outcome lends itself to a laundry list of horrors, like civilian casualties, destroyed infrastructure, and mass displacement. Which means the United States risks creating exactly the kind of instability that produces the next generation of extremism. Because nothing radicalizes a population faster than watching foreign troops roll down your street in armored vehicles. It turns out people don't love that. And let's talk about the part that Congress really understands: money. Because guess what? Modern ground wars are extraordinarily costly. Even a limited ground operation has a pretty decent chance of spiraling into paying for occupation forces, reconstruction costs, a long-term military presence, and expanded veterans care. The administration is already discussing potential war funding that could exceed tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. Lawmakers on both sides are already worried about additional massive spending. Think about this. The Trump administration is already aware of the growing unpopularity of this war. Trump himself has already said several times that we've basically won, even if he's not willing to say it's over. So, why is the White House about to put out a funding request for another $200 billion? Aren't we supposed to be winding down? What the fuck sense does that make? We're pumping money into a new Middle East conflict at a moment when the national debt is so astronomical that it can probably be viewed from space. And voters from every demographic are concerned about inflation and cost of living. A long, drawn-out war in Iran would almost certainly require emergency spending, defense production increases, and logistical deployments across the region in a way that we know from previous wars will only escalate with time. Every dollar spent occupying Iran is a dollar not spent at home. Wars like this are not merely expensive, they are biblically expensive. The Iraq War alone cost, again, around $2 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's enough money to give every single American a brand new Ford F-150 and still have enough left over to build a bridge in New Jersey that actually works. And that was just Iraq. An invasion of Iran, where the conflict becomes ongoing, would make what happened in Iraq look like a stay at a Motel 6 with a Groupon discount. But the biggest danger for Trump specifically might actually be political. Mind you, Democrats, the legacy media, and everyone else have been writing Trump's political obituary for years. It hasn't happened yet. And maybe that's because a political movement this expansive and sincere can't be taken down by outside forces. They tried to impeach him. It didn't work. They tried to bankrupt him. It didn't work. They tried to imprison him. It didn't fucking work. They tried to kill him, and it propelled him back to the White House for a second term. And now that he's there, those same forces are doing everything they can to shut down his agenda through procedural delays, opportunistic lawfare, and a judiciary that's gone rogue. I don't agree with most of what the man does, and even I have to admit that the pair of hands trying to crumple Donald Trump's worldview and throw it into the dustbin of history is absolutely massive and relentless. And yet still he persists, which leads me to suspect that if anything is going to bring Trump down, it would have to be Trump himself, and this might be the closest he has ever come to doing exactly that. Because the people who chant America first at Trump rallies, and they are welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, they don't want another Iraq, another Afghanistan, another 20-year foreign occupation. Even if he ran on the idea that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon, none of these guys were saying, let's invade Iran. One of the central pillars of Donald Trump's political appeal has been the promise to end endless wars in the Middle East. Iraq war, interventionism, overseas nation building, and wasting American resources on foreign conflicts are all things Trump repeatedly criticized previous administrations for. The America First doctrine he outlined himself focused on avoiding costly foreign entanglements, prioritizing domestic economic strength, and limiting military involvement abroad. He said it. He said all those things. So deploying ground troops in Iran would represent the complete opposite of that philosophy. Instead of restraint, it would be like a huge bat signal telling everyone to expect nation-building risks, open-ended military commitments, and a brand new Middle East war. Even within the Republican coalition, this tension is visible. Don't get me wrong. Republicans in general seem to support Trump's Iran initiative so far by an overwhelming number. I think it was about 80 or 90%. But that's contingent on a swift resolution. Republican voters aren't in favor of another Middle East quagmire, and they're in good company. Nobody wants that shit. Only about 20% of Republicans support sending in U.S. ground troops. Limited airstrikes, yes. Boots on the ground? No. Hell no. It looks like a political contradiction. It's not. Trump's base supports a show of strength. They always have. But they don't support another Iraq-style war because they're not fucking stupid. The political risk is real. If the conflict expands or casualties rise, the very voters who propelled Trump to power are going to be really pissed off. Not all of them, but enough of them to cause the man some serious electoral problems. Because remember, the America First coalition wanted things like stronger borders, cheaper gas, American factories doing American manufacturing, not a Tehran nation-building initiative, exercise, whatever. There is a clear difference between these two things. Here's the good news, though. There are off-ramps. Multiple off-ramps. Mr. President, there is always an escape hatch until there isn't. And I encourage you to use one while you still can. The key to avoiding escalation is creating face-saving exit strategies that allow the administration to declare success without deploying ground forces. A nuclear containment deal would enable the president to say that U.S. pressure forced Iran to halt nuclear enrichment, surrender nuclear materials, and accept international monitoring. Even a limited concession could be framed as a decisive victory. A security agreement for the Strait of Hormuz would also be a victory. Go to the bargaining table and create a multinational naval agreement reopening the strait. That's a strategic success. The president could argue that U.S. air and cyber strikes have already achieved their objectives through a limited strike doctrine. They've destroyed missile infrastructure, degraded Iranian military capabilities, and deterred future threats. These are real things that have already happened. Bingo, we're done. And Trump has already claimed that Iranian military is being neutralized, which lays the groundwork for declaring success without escalation. And let's not forget, a negotiated ceasefire framed as Iran seeking negotiations due to the overwhelming strength of U.S. forces would allow Trump to pivot to diplomacy while maintaining his image as a tough negotiator. He doesn't have to lose a damn thing. Because geopolitics is often less about winning wars and more about declaring victory loudly enough. And Donald Trump loves those two things, declaring victory and being loud. It works. Trump could easily say, look, we hit their military infrastructure. We showed strength. Iran backed down. Mission accomplished. Boom, victory speech. Flags, eagles, everyone goes home. Honestly, modern geopolitics is more about narrative control than anything else. If you say you won on television loudly enough, at least half the country will believe it happened. Do it, Mr. President. Declare victory. Secure a diplomatic concession and bring the focus back home. That approach preserves political capital, avoids a generational war, and maintains alignment with the America First doctrine that got you elected. Because, speaking of elections, if you're thinking about the midterm elections, the issues that actually move voters aren't in Tehran. They're right here. Gas prices, groceries, immigration, jobs. The things that put Trump into office are still sitting right there, ready and waiting to keep the Democrats at bay. Because between the president's basement-dwelling approval rating among independents, the Democrats' tendency to fall ass backward into good fortune despite their incompetence, and the historical context of the president's party usually losing seats in a midterm election, things are looking a little dicey for Donald Trump right now. This is not the time for the president to start a foreign war that will suck up all the political oxygen, because believe me, it will. The media is not your friend, Mr. President. You know this. The more Lindsey Graham goes on Fox News to excitedly tell everyone that we should be eager and willing to send our sons and daughters to die on foreign soil for Israel's war, The harder you defend Zionist extremists like Mark Levin from the righteous anger of your most devoted followers, the closer you come to completing your bizarre metamorphosis into a Ben Shapiro neocon. Well, the media is just going to amplify war, war, war. And those domestic issues that power your populist movement will get pushed off the stage at a time when you and we need them the most. America has learned this lesson before, many times before. Do we really have to learn it again? Winning wars is easy. Ending them is the hard part. And the Middle East has a long history of turning quick military victories into long political nightmares. So, if the administration wants to stay aligned with the voters who brought them to power, the smartest strategy might not be escalation. It might be something far more radical. Stop while you're ahead. Declare victory. Bring the troops home. And focus on the country that the slogan was supposed to be about in the first place. America. Every time America starts talking about sending troops somewhere new, there's this weird moment where the country collectively develops amnesia. Like, we all woke up one morning and said, wait, didn't we already try this several times for like 20 years each? We did the Vietnam War. We did the war in Afghanistan. We did the Iraq War. And every single time the pitch was exactly the same. This one will be quick. This one will be different. This one will stabilize the region. And every single time, the bill comes due later. Not just in money, but in lives. In veterans who come home carrying things the rest of us never had to see. In families that spend decades asking the same question. Was it worth it? And here's the thing that should really bother all of us about the conversation happening right now. Nobody asking for boots on the ground is volunteering their own boots. It's always someone else's kid, someone else's deployment, someone else's 20-year war. If you're going to send Americans into combat, the bar should be impossibly high. Not, this might help geopolitically. Not, this will look strong on cable news. The bar should be simple. Does this make the United States safer in a way that cannot be achieved any other way? If the answer is no, then the answer to war should also be no. Because strength isn't just about how quickly a country can start a war. Real strength is knowing when not to start one. It's knowing when power should be used carefully, not constantly. And it's remembering that the people who pay the price for these decisions are not pundits. They're soldiers, the most patriotic Americans of all. So if our leaders want to show strength right now, here's the move. Show that America has learned something over the last 20 years. Show that we know the difference between defending our country and occupying someone else's. And show the world that the most powerful military on earth is also powerful enough to choose restraint. Because sometimes the bravest thing a country can do is not repeat the same mistake again.